All righty, we are going to get going here. Hopefully you had a chance to get some good gratitudes down and write some intentions of what you want to do and accomplish. Well, here's what I want to talk about today. Actually, I've changed my mind about 3 times this morning of what I'm going to talk about, and so hopefully I've landed on it now because it's time to start. So we're going. So here's what we're going to do is what I've got written up here on the board, and hopefully you can see it, is I've got the learning curve drawn, but then I've got that learning curve broken down into 4 different sections. And what I want to talk about it, with it being a Monday, and hopefully one of the things that I love to talk about is setting appointments. Because for me, in my own career, what I found is when I got to the point where what I decided to do is that I would set one appointment every single day, and to the point where I had decided I won't go home until I set an appointment, is when things really made a huge impact for me on my business and had my business really take off and go to another whole new level with that. Am I still on? It's saying that okay, I just had a pop-up saying that I had been signed out. So, okay, I see Judy gave me a thumbs up. Thanks, Judy. Okay, so yeah, for some reason, my Zoom just popped up and said, you've been signed out. And I was like, uh-oh, but, oh, okay. Apparently it was Rick, I guess. Okay, Judy says I'm good. So I'm trusting I'm good. All right, so when I got to that point where I decided, look, I am going to set an appointment or I will not go home, is where my business changed. Now, what I want to talk to you today is what got me to that point. Because for a long time, I would prospect and work, but I was not being very effective. And so being productive is not the same thing as just being on the phone and prospecting. Now, hopefully you understand that, but if not, I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And so here's what I have found is I have spent the last about 15 years training agents and helping them either go to the next level or for a new agent to get their business up and running. And here is what I have found is there is a journey or a process that typically an agent is going to go through to get to becoming a top agent in this business. And what it looks like is this, is typically on this learning curve. And in fact, there's a great book that if you have not read it, the name of the book is Mastery. And if I remember right, the author is George Leonard. I'm pretty sure that's right. But the name of the book is Mastery. It's not a thick read. But in that, he talks about what it is like to master anything. And this learning curve is what he talks about. And what he says is this, is that typically what is going to happen when you're learning a new skill is you are going to have a time where you work on the skill, and you can see here on this line that I've got drawn right here, that really it just stays flat. Nothing really has happened. And as you work on a new skill, that is what typically is going to happen, is as you work on it, doesn't matter if it's sports or if it's the skill of asking from setting appointments, but as you work on that skill, what is going to happen is that you are going to notice that you're doing all this work, but it doesn't feel like anything is changing. Well, that is part of the process. And the example that I like to use with this is in talking about the way that bamboo grows. See, people think, oh, bamboo grows really fast. Well, it does once it starts to grow. But after you plant the seed, it is going to be 4 years before you see it actually even pop through the ground. Well, that's because it's getting its root structure in place. And so as you learn any new skill, keep in mind at first, really not much is going to happen. Now, let me relate this to real estate, though, because in real estate, what I like to call that phase is the activities phase. In this activities phase is where we think we're working, but we're really not working. Meaning things like this, is we will say to ourselves, well, I need to create a flyer so that I could go out and knock on some doors. And so then we will spend an entire day putting together a flyer. Well, that would be this activities phase. Or I need to get my website set up so that when I go outdoor knocking, I can tell people where to go. And then we'll spend a month putting together a website. In fact, just recently, I had a couple of agents come and talk to me about that, about setting up a website. And what I told them is I gave them some advice on it. And then about 2 weeks later, might have even been a month later, they came back and talked to me again about it. And here's what I realized. In the 2 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it had been, that is all they had done. They had worked on getting their website set up the entire time. Well, see, that's the activities phase. Now, looking at this learning curve, if you thought about this learning curve in terms of your income, how much money do you make during that activities phase? In doing things like putting together your website, or if for a new agent, I got to learn how to learn the purchase contract, and I got to figure out how to fill it out. And I watch an agent get an offer accepted and under contract, and then they'll spend 3 days trying to get that worked on and put together. See, all of those things are in this activities phase. And when we are in this activities phase, which I'm not saying these things are not important and things that we should do, but we need to control it. You know, Lindsay talked before about time blocking, which is so important, of making sure that you schedule some time to do some of these things, but that you also have your prospecting, your lead follow-up, and your appointment times scheduled in there, and that you are sticking with those as well, not spending your whole day on this activities phase. Well, after that, the next phase of this is what we would call the contacts phase. Now, for me as a new agent, and some of you I know I've shared this story with, but as a new agent, I remember going to my manager and saying to him, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do to get my business going. And he essentially said this. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version, but he said, go knock on doors for 2 hours for the next 2 years, and then you'll never have to go do it again. Well, I started to go and do that. Essentially, what he told me was this. He told me, go make 50 contacts every day. See, the second phase of this on this learning curve is the contacts phase. And that phase is hugely important, meaning we got to get out of this activities phase, which I would venture to guess. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys are the ones who are probably doing all of this stuff. But just keep in mind, when you feel like you're in a slump, or if you feel like your business is not going where you want it to go, keep in mind of, am I stuck in this activities phase? And the way you do that is by keeping track of, where is your time being spent? Where am I spending my time? And if it is in these activities phase, then say, I got to get into the contacts phase. And so for me, what happened is, early on, I had said, I am going to make a commitment to make 50 contacts every single day. Well, I did that. And so essentially I would make every week between 200 and 250, because I didn't get it every single day, but I would say on a weekly basis, I was getting 200 contacts every week at a minimum, and trying to get to 250, but minimum of 200 every week. Well, here's what I found that would happen as a result of this is, I would go out and make contacts, but guess what? Because I was focused on contacts. So here's kind of the first principle of today that I want to talk about, is focus. Because my focus was on making contacts, at the end of the day, guess what I had? Contacts. I had made contacts. And I love the story that Jason Carlson, who's one of the managers here in Utah, tells about a day that he decided he wanted to make 100 contacts in a day. And so he took the entire day to go through and do 100 contacts in a day. Now, I have never personally done 100 contacts in a day, but I've done 50 plenty of times. And I'll tell you, the thought of doing 100 to me, kind of like, I'm like, ugh, I didn't like that idea much. But he did 100 contacts. At the end of the day, though, he stopped and thought about it and realized, I made 100 contacts and got 0 appointments. See, that's the next phase of this. The next phase of this is what we would call the appointments phase. Now, for me as a new agent, I was in this 50 contacts phase, but I wasn't really making the money. Meaning, like, I have heard, and for 25 years, I have heard people talk about and say, and I think it's a good place to start. So don't hear this as a negative, because I'm not saying it as a negative, even though it might sound like it, is I have heard people say the number of contacts that you do in a day, if you do it consistently, is the number of transactions you will do. Well, for me personally, that never happened. While I was doing 50 contacts every single day, I never did 50 transactions. And I'm telling you, for a year and a half, I did 50 contacts essentially every day. And when I look back on it, I was just barely getting by. So now, again, like I said, do not take away from what I just said that's a bad thing, because I feel like that is a good place to start. And it is a good place to look at and to say is, okay, I need to figure out a number of contacts that I am going to make. Now, as we talked about in our 12 steps of the Summit of Success, the company's recommendation to you is that you do 30 contacts a day, that you spend the time every day to get 30 contacts a day. And if you will do that, that is a great, great place to start. But here's what I found, and I'm just sharing with you what happened for me in my business, is doing 50 contacts a day. I was making money and surviving and getting by. But when I learned this process, and I had a mentor show me this, is that on this learning curve, 50 contacts a day, or a number of contacts a day, you can see there's some liftoff. It does get things going. But what he showed me is the next phase of this, which is what we call the appointments phase, is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the business is going to take off for you and do what you want it to do. And so here's what this mentor told me, is he said, quit worrying about contacts. Now, let me pause. That doesn't mean don't track them. You need to track your contacts. So I'm not saying don't track them. But what he said is quit focusing on the contact and instead put your focus on making an appointment. And as he recommended to me, to when you prospect every day, don't worry about hitting 50 contacts. Instead, worry about setting an appointment. And here's what I will tell you. When I made that decision to go from, I'm going to make 50 contacts, or what I told you about Jason Carlson of doing 100 contacts, when I went from that to saying, I will do as many contacts as it takes to get an appointment, is when the business took off for me. And here's what I will tell you. I ended up prospecting half as much to get an appointment when I focused to that. See, the focus is the most important thing, is if your focus is on getting contacts, you will end up making contacts that at the end of the day, I would go home feeling like, hey, I got my 50 contacts. I can feel good about myself. And I did. And it was okay to feel good about myself, but my checkbook didn't reflect, my bank account didn't reflect the income that I wanted to have. And the moment I said, I'm going to not focus on getting 50 contacts every day, I'm going to focus on getting an appointment. Now, here's the second thing. So when you have the focus, so number one is focus. Number two is when you have that focus, you will then change your approach. And so part of what I want you to look at is when you are prospecting, what is your approach that you're using? Because here's what changed for me. When I was focused on contacts, essentially when somebody opened the door, or if I was on the phone and somebody picked up the phone and I could say, my name is Russ with XYZ Real Estate. As soon as that happened, in my mind, it was like, whoop, there's one contact. Like it didn't matter to me what happened as a result of that conversation. There was my contact and I only needed 49 more and I could quit. See, but as soon as I changed it from that to, okay, I have to get an appointment, here's what happens. As soon as you do that, you will change your approach in what you are saying. See, instead of being worried that they just picked up the phone or that they opened the door, all of a sudden, what I did was to change that to, I have to talk to them in such a way and create a relationship or a connection with them. I got to connect and build some rapport so that I could then create some value so that I could then ask for an appointment. See, that's the approach that we have to have. And once I changed from contacts to appointments, now you will notice on here on this learning curve that appointments phase is the steepest part of the curve. But the good news is, because it is the steepest part of the curve, it is also, your income grows exponentially as a result of it. Meaning that as you focus on this and you get better at it, you don't have to work as hard, or let me rephrase that. The amount of effort that you are putting into it, your income goes up dramatically, even though you are not putting any extra effort or time into it. See, and what happened was this. The guy that taught me this, what he told me is if you will change your focus from a certain number of contacts. Now, again, I don't want it to sound like I'm not saying don't keep track of your contacts. You've got to keep track, because the way you're going to know how effective you are being and if you are getting better at the skill is by keeping track of your contacts. But your focus has got to be on setting that appointment. And what he said to me, and I will tell you, for me, it made the difference. As soon as I switched from having a focus on a certain number of contacts to I'm going to set an appointment today regardless of the number of contacts I make, what changed in it is then all of a sudden I got way more appointments. See, prior to that, I would do 50 contacts a day, or essentially 250 a week. But at the end of the week, I might have 1 or 2 appointments. All of a sudden now, I'm getting 5 appointments a week, and my income went up dramatically. And I will tell you, over the next year, when I made that switch from focusing on contacts to appointments, I doubled my income. The next year, I doubled my income again. And the next year after that, I almost doubled it again. I didn't, but it was close. And it was all because all I did was focus on, I have to set an appointment today, and I won't go home until I do. So I would recommend for you that you look at what is your focus on when you're prospecting. And so for this week, keep an eye on what is your focus. Are you focusing on a number of contacts, or are you focusing on setting appointments? Because if your focus is on the contacts, I'm going to challenge you for this week to change that to, I am going to keep track of my contacts. And if you've got an accountability to do a number of contracts, great, do it. But along the way, have your focus really be on, I have to set a minimum of 1 appointment a day. And here's what I will promise you. If you will do that, you are going to see a dramatic increase in the number of appointments that you go on. You're going to see a dramatic increase in the income that you get. And you're going to have a dramatic increase in the time available for you to go and be with the people that you want to be spending your time with. Because as you focus on that and you get better at setting the appointment, it doesn't take as many contacts. See, and for me, that's where the rubber hit the road. And once you know, I can't go home until I get an appointment, and you may or may not want to make that commitment, but I will tell you, if you will do that, then providence moves too. All sorts of things will happen for you that wouldn't otherwise have happened if you didn't make the commitment. See, that's what commitment does for you, is it's the whole idea of burn the boats. You get to the land, you burn the boats, you're going to take the island if you do that. And that's the idea of this. Decide, I will not go home until I set an appointment. And if you'll do that, watch what happens. Now, in the event that you're struggling with getting appointments and you want help, here's what I will offer to you. If you will record yourself making some phone calls, and then if you will send it in to me, I will be more than happy then to listen to it and get back with you and do some coaching with you on what you need to change in it. Because I guarantee you, as I said, it is something in your approach that you are taking that is stopping the appointments from happening if you're not getting them. But if you will do that, see what would happen. Imagine what would happen in your life and in your career if you could just set 2 or 3 more appointments this week than what you did last week. What would that change for you? What would it do for your income? What would it do for the way that your life is spent? Well, that's my challenge for you this week, is don't focus on the contacts, keep track of the contacts, but don't focus on them. Focus instead on a number of appointments and decide, I will not stop until I get it, and then see what happens. Well, the next step on this, let me just kind of wrap it up with this, is what we call the transactions phase. If you feel like you are at the phase where you are saying, hey, I'm good at this and I get an appointment every day, then here's the next step. When you want to take your business to the next level, after you have gotten to where you're setting 1 appointment a day, the next step, now this is where the top producers are at. So this is the Tina Hare, the Brian Burnett. This is where they're at, is they need to go on an appointment every day. See, I'm saying just set an appointment here. When you want to get to this next phase, which is the transactions phase, where you're doing a ton of transactions, the way that you get there is you have to keep an appointment every day. Well, so if you're going to keep an appointment every day, you're probably going to have to set 2 or 3 every day in order to be able to keep that 1 every single day. So if you're wanting to go to the next level, take a look at this and see where you're at. Because my guess is, if you're either in the activities or the contacts phase, you might be in the appointments phase. And if you are in the appointments phase where you're setting at least 1 appointment every day and you want to go to the next, then make the commitment that you won't go home until you keep an appointment for the day. You keep an appointment every day and watch what happens to your business. All right. Well, hopefully that was helpful for you guys. Hopefully it gets you off to a good start for this week. This is a Monday morning, ready to rock and roll for the week. So thank you for being with me. Go out there and make it happen. Let's wrap up with some closing affirmations and then go